Good morning, everybody. And today is a Saturday. I got up around 8:20, which isn't terrible, but still makes me feel like I wasted a lot of hours. Needless to say, I made myself 2 eggies in a basket, and now I think I am ready to tackle putting this top together. So I started measuring my squares this morning, and I decided not to trim them down to 9.5 inches because actually they were just a little shy of 9.5 inches, and I definitely don't want to cut off whatever fabric I have. So I'm going to MacGyver them together. I've done this before. A 1/4 inch seam allowance helps hide a multitude of sins. But I should be okay, honestly. They are really close, nothing too bad, and by eyeballing it between my nice straight cut pieces, we should be fine. So I have my whole pile here. They're not all in order. I'm going to lay them all out. And after thinking the other day about this and how I said I had extra background fabric for this piece, I then noticed the kind of dead space around the actual squares itself, and I was like, okay, I probably actually do need to cut out a couple of strips to make that pretty close to this original pattern that the Sewcialites came out with. So I should have enough. I'll probably cut them out at 5 inches so they go down to 4.5 once sewn on, so they're kind of half of the size of my blocks. But again, once I get those blocks all put together, that's when I will decide how big I want to cut those strips and how much fabric I actually have for that. And then I was also thinking of playing a little bit of chicken. And I too also have extra fabric of this. And it was originally directional, but now that I have it all cut up into like half triangles, it doesn't really show the direction all that much because you just have like lots of tons of botanicals swishing around in all directions. So, I don't need to put them upright directionally wise when I'm making this whole entire these points, but basically I have some extra of that fabric, and I might attempt to see if I have enough to actually finish off with the binding with that fabric, since it has a nice dark blue, and I think it would make a nice little picture frame for this whole entire quilt. So I literally moved around my whole entire apartment to try and make this fit on the floor over here. So yeah, I cleaned, I've barricaded myself in a little bit. Luckily, the front door is available and free just in case, somebody tries to burn down the apartment. But other than that, hopefully this will be a large enough spot for me to lay this down, and you can actively see as I start putting all those patterns down. And then I got my sewing machine set up over here, so we can pretty much start sewing those together once I have placed them on this large blank canvas. And of course, I'm not pinning anything on this floor. This is carpet. You do not want to do that. If you plan to quilt your quilt by hand, do not pin it to a carpeted surface. You will probably pin it to that surface and never get it off until you take everything apart and then have to redo it again. So this is just to lay out the pattern and then pick it up and sew it. And I also have my lovely iron shoved in the corner just to iron as I go. So yeah, I thought this apartment would be definitely bigger than what I originally had, because I was originally fit into one room at my housemate's house. And then we started taking everything out of that room, and I have a lot of stuff. But nevertheless, this is going to happen, and hopefully you will enjoy this little tidbit of patching together patches and blocks. All right, here we go. So I finished laying out the whole entire quilt. It's fitting together pretty well. I think the only change that I really made was up where you see the those two similar fabrics right here and right here. Well, they were right next to each other originally, and I didn't really like that, so I put them at least diagonally from each other. But I did know going into this project that I was probably going to have a lot of pink squares, just because my housemate that I originally had started this project on back during quarantine, she chose a pink background. So I was going to try and use as many pinks in that layered cake bundle, and then try and give her more of the blues and whites and anything that would contrast that pink color. So that's why I have quite a bit of pink for my squares. I do have quite a bit of blue too, honestly, but I mean, I love dark blue, so I'm not too sad about that. So now that I have it all pretty much laid out, I can start piecing it together and then ironing it as I go. And yeah, that's gonna be fun because my sewing machine's there, so I can easily pick up from left to right and sew. But then when I want to iron, I just gonna have to go walk all the way around the circumference and then hit my ironing board over there. So you're gonna see a lot of body going back and forth in this next segment, but you will slowly see this sucker come together, or at least you're gonna see it faster than if I just did it in real time. So hopefully it won't bore you to tears just yet. All right, here we go. Quick note before I start piecing this all together, you are probably going to see this chair move around a lot because literally my sewing machine is right next to that. So unfortunately that might cut off some of your visual. I do apologize, but you know, people got to do what they got to do in small spaces. So here we go. Alright, so I am interrupting my super long video with a quick update of how it's going. So I've basically gotten through half of my block so far for the strips, and I've got the other half to go. It's lining up pretty well. What I'm doing to compensate for my slightly smaller blocks is on my sewing machine, it marks it at about 3.8 millimeters or so for like a 1/4 inch. Which I need to double check because I think my machine might be off slightly, and I need to see if I can make a custom stitch so that when I measure it and I figure out the correct 1/4 inch seam allowance, I can like just create a stitch and then go to that instead of having to like manually change it every single time, because that's just gonna get annoying. But for my actual blocks where I've sewn, because they are slightly smaller, I'm doing a smaller seam allowance between those, or at least equal to the kind of 1/4 inch, and then any pieces that are connecting a block to like one of my larger actual 9.5 inch squares, I am increasing that seam allowance but staggering my smaller block piece on it, so that way it's hopefully taking up a little bit more of this one and then less of this one, or at least equal to a 1/4 inch on that one. So that way when I have to line up these points here and there, that they're going to be hopefully a little bit more aligned and not so bad when I have to sew those together and make it look somewhat more neat. So hopefully that's gonna go well. And you know, quilting, it can either bring out the extreme perfectionist in you, or if you're kind of a perfectionist already, it kind of helps you lax in those, because they're basically, as long as you get this sewn together and it's relatively smooth and you can quilt on it, you've got a finished quilt. And that's like the main goal of whenever I do this, is that I would love for my seams to always be great, but of course sometimes your sewing machine's off or whatever happens to your block to not make it quite the right size. You just gotta MacGyver it together, and at that point you just gotta let go and know that this quilt's not going to be perfect in its lining up of seams and stuff. And as long as you just actually get this quilt completed and it's not sitting in your closet for 10 plus years because you're just mad at it, I think that's a win in all situations. So here we go with the second half, and I might actually take a break before I get around to that, so I'll be back when I'm back. Alright, so I finished sewing all the strips together. That took me about 2 hours and 23 minutes. But honestly, I kind of allotted this whole day except for dinner time to get this top done. So I think I'm doing pretty good so far because it's around 1 p.m. and I started around 11 or so, 10:30. So yeah, so I think we're doing pretty good. It's looking like it's lining up pretty well, which is going to be nice. But for most of these block pieces, I did not pin them, but now that I have the strips, I will be pinning where I want to make those points as close as possible. So we're going to continue with that next. So I have gotten 4 of my main seams done, so now I have 3 more seams to do because they're in 2 rows each now. So those are sewn together, these are sewn together, that's sewn together, and these 2 are sewn together. So far it's doing okay. I decided not to tape myself ironing these because I was deciding to open those seams to iron them flat to try and make them just a little flatter and easier to machine quilt over, and I'm pretty sure you guys do not want to see that because I am super tired of it too. So now I'm going to finish pinning up the last of this and then sewing those, and the top will be pretty much complete. And I might add those borders later onto it, the leftover background fabric that I have. I'll probably add on it to it later, but I probably won't film that because you guys are already sick and tired of seeing this quilt. So without further ado, here we go again. Okay, I have literally one more seam right in the middle right there that I need to do, and then this top, and it's block piecing, not border piecing, will be all complete. Here we go. I am done with this whole entire top besides borders. It took about 5 hours and 30 minutes, and I never thought I would really relate too Frodo of the Shire, but I feel like I'm very much at that exasperated mode of, it's done, it's finished. I've thrown the ring into the Mountain of Doom, or the fires of Mount Doom, and that's what I'm feeling right now. And at least I'm not throwing this quilt anywhere or destroying it, so if that did happen, I probably would just curl up into the fetal position and kind of die. But yeah, this has literally been maybe 2/3 of a year project, at least, for getting all those blocks created and then finally assembled. And then I still probably have a few more weeks of getting the border on, finally quilting it. I also have over here this pile. So yeah, so here's the remaining of the border, hopefully my binding fabric. And then I also got to piece my backing fabric together, but I need to get it washed first, so I will be taking that and getting it washed and then sewing that together. And then once all that's done, then I can quilt this whole thing and then hand piece the binding on after. Of course, I machine sew it on, but folding it over and then hand binding it on, because I do enjoy doing that. And technically I just haven't looked into learning how to machine bind, just because I do enjoy a marathon of movies doing that manual kind of work. So that is it. Thanks for following me on this extremely long journey, and I will come back to you when I've done more on this project, or maybe at least give you an update as to when it gets finished and show you some of the quilting that I decided to do on it. We shall see. Thanks again, everybody, and happy quilting.